following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
I'm Larry Mone, president of the Manhattan Institute. I thank you all for coming. My role today is to introduce Herman Badillo's introducer, former New York City Mayor Ed Koch, and I'm delighted to do so. Like Herman, Mayor Koch is a free-thinking, straight-talking New Yorker. And like Herman, he's always put the best interests of the city and America ahead, has always put the best interests of New York and America ahead of partisan politics. Few people know Herman better than Mayor Koch. They both cut their teeth in New York City politics during the tumultuous 1960s and served together in Congress during the equally tumultuous 1970s. After Ed Koch was elected mayor in 1977, he brought Herman into his administration to serve as deputy mayor, and together they set to work repairing the wounds of 2 decades of bad ideas that had been inflicted upon the city. In recognition of Mayor Koch's leadership during this crucial period in New York's history, I'm pleased to announce that the Manhattan Institute will be honoring him this year with our 2007 Alexander Hamilton Award. His co-honoree this year will be Rupert Murdoch, and the dinner is scheduled for May 8th, and details will be coming in the mail, so pay attention. For today, however, I simply want to keep it short, and please join me in welcoming a man who is a true New York original, Mayor Ed Koch.
I have known Herman for at least 40 years. Our political lives have been intertwined. They've been remarked upon by Larry a moment ago, and I won't add to that other than to say that the one cardinal distinction for Herman is his courage. He has never, ever stood down, blinked, or declined to say that which he thought should be said for the good of the community, whether it was the entire community or the Hispanic community in particular. And he took many brickbats, but he never stopped. And that's what I have always admired. And I'm going to tell you just only one story. I'll leave the others to him. When Joel Klein, the chancellor, took over, the issue of social promotion was in every newspaper. And Joel Klein, I don't know whether he remembers it, but he was for social promotion at the time. And Herman and I went to see him. And we urged him to end the existing social promotion based upon what we had done when Herman and I were in the city administration and Macchiarola was chancellor, who ended social promotion in the school system. And then it crept back in after we left. Herman said to Joel Klein, "This destroys students." And Joel Klein conveyed how difficult it would be to convince parents. And what Herman said to Joel Klein was, "I will go to the Hispanic communities and the black communities, and I, who have a position in those communities, will stand up and tell them how important it is to end social promotion so that their children have a chance to succeed." Ultimately, Joel Klein changed his mind and agreed to end social promotion. But what I find a joke, if you will, and I verified it today with those who know, that social promotion, which was ended by Macchiarola throughout the school system, that in the current school system, social promotion doesn't exist in 3 grades, 3, 5, and 7. Now think of all the years that have gone by since he's been chancellor. It's ridiculous. And so that mark alone of Herman willing to stand up and take the blows that would come in defending elimination of social promotion. For me, if I were handing out medals, congressional medals of honor, such a medal would I give to Herman Badillo. Herman.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for your support over the years. And as you point out, the fact that we were not in office did not keep us and has not kept us and will not keep us from getting involved in the problems of the city. And I want to thank Larry Mone from the Manhattan Institute, not just for this luncheon, but for your support in making my book possible. And I certainly want to thank all of you for coming here today. This book, One Nation, One Standard, is about the Hispanic community in the United States now and in the future, and what needs to be done, in my opinion, to make sure that this community is able to become assimilated and move ahead and become a part of this country. And I consider it to be an urgent problem because our community is now 42 million people and amounts to about 15% of the total US population. And it is projected that in the next 50 years, we will be over 102 million people, and we will be 25% of the population. That makes us now and in the future the largest ethnic group in the country. And think of what a tragedy it would be if a group that represents 15 to 25% of a nation is not able to move ahead like other immigrants have done. We cannot allow that to happen. And that is why I wrote the book, because we need to take urgent action. The tragedy is that we have not moving ahead as fast as we need to do. Because, for example, in the class of 2005, the Department of Education, Joe Klein's department, reported that 22,000 Hispanic students were in high school, but only 11,000 graduated. That's about 50%. And it has been reported in other papers and books that even those who graduate are years behind regular students in accomplishment. But today, a high school diploma has minimal value because we live in an information society and times have changed. In my own time, I worked my way through junior high school, college, and law school as a pinboy in a bowling alley. Now bowling alleys are automatic. I worked as an elevator boy. Now elevators are automatic. I worked in a factory. Factories are now gone to other parts of the world. I worked as a bookkeeper and eventually became a certified public accountant, but the bookkeeping now is done by computers. I went to Congress. Nixon tried to abolish Congress, but we didn't let him do that. But the point is that the use of muscle is only good for running marathons these days. We need to have a trained mind. We need to go well beyond high school and into college and professional studies. And my studies and those of other people indicate that the way to progress in this country is through education. There was a time when Ed and I were in Congress that people were talking about solving the problems of poverty. But we learned that government is not going to solve the problems of poverty. It's not going to provide jobs for all or housing for all or health care for all. But that education is. Education is the answer to poverty, because if you get a good education, you'll get your own job, your own housing, your own health care, and provide for the needs of the family. And that is why I keep saying to the Hispanic community and to all who will listen over the years that education is the most important thing that needs to be accomplished. Now the problem is that we have a dysfunctional school system as Ed has indicated, we have problems such as social promotion, and even though we eliminate them, they come right back. And there are other problems which I'll discuss. However, the fact is that there are many groups who do not accept the dysfunction, who in spite of all, go ahead and move on and achieve success. And I'll mention one of those groups because it is the group that most resembles the Hispanic community, and that is the Asians. The Asian community has essentially the same problems that we do because they're discriminated against, they have language problems, and they're poor. And yet, the Asian students in Stuyvesant High School, in Bronx Science in New York, achieve remarkable numbers. In the population of only 4% nationwide, in the Ivy League colleges, accomplishes up to 20%. Now that is a remarkable achievement. How do they do it? Because the culture of the Asian community requires that education be the most important priority. The Asian parents insist that their kids not only go to school, but do their homework. They insist that the kids understand they're going to go to college, just like in other communities. When a child is born, the parents open up an account for the kid to go to college. That doesn't happen very often in the Hispanic community. And the Asian parents see to it that they attend the parent-teachers conferences, that they inspire the kids to value education above social acceptability. And the whole family verifies that the education is working for the individual. That doesn't happen as a tradition in the Hispanic family. And one of the reasons it doesn't happen is what I call the 5-century siesta. The Central and Latin America was populated primarily by Spain. That was our mother country. But Spain was never interested in the population in the Latin America. Spain was only interested in bringing back gold and silver and exploit the resources of the countries. So Spain set up from 1500 to 1808 a feudal system where the top group controlled the territories. They didn't kill the Indians, which is the one thing that the Spaniards did, but they made them into serfs. And that feudal system, which had been abolished in Europe, continued throughout those 3 centuries. In Latin America, there was no industrial revolution, there was no French Revolution, there was no economic development plan. And when Napoleon conquered Spain and the Latin American countries were able to achieve independence, the people who took over were caudillos, dictators, like Porfirio Diaz in Mexico, who lasted for over 20 years, and others, mostly colonels, who carried out coups d'etats and controlled the countries and never believed in a permanent constitution, never believed in a Bill of Rights, never believed in education. And that went on to the present day, where we have similar dictators who are now running the Latin American countries. I just recently read that one of those fellows took over, and he's spending his time writing the constitution for his country. They think that the Constitution is something that the president decides to write all by himself. And he fired all the judges. And he's now trying to set up a whole system of government. That is what I call, from 1500 to 2000, a 500-year siesta. And therefore, those of us who come to the United States do not have that tradition, which the Asian community does. And that is why it's so important that every one of us speak out, and that's certainly why I speak out, about making sure that that attitude is changed, making sure that our community understands that education is and should be the first priority, and that the individual children go out and get a great education. And this is a job for the entire community and for all of the families. Now, you cannot accept the fact that the system is dysfunctional, the educational system. You have to oppose it That's why I say in my book, we have to understand the particular problems that make the system dysfunctional. And one of them I'm responsible for, and that is bilingual education. I thought when I was a young man that it would be helpful to have bilingual education to help the Hispanic community learn to speak English. And when I went to Congress, I served in the Committee on Education and Labor. And in that committee, I pushed and got approved a bilingual education program. The idea was, and I know this because when I came here I couldn't speak English myself, that if you spend your time trying to learn English, then you fall behind on course content, so that by the time you learn to speak English, you are behind several grades, and then you have a very high chance of dropping out. The idea was that while you are learning English, you should be getting the course content in Spanish, so that when you learn the language, you have not fallen behind in course content. That was the concept, and it required two things. One, that English first. The idea is to learn to speak English. Secondly, that it be for a limited time only, for a year and a half. But what has happened since then is not the bilingual education program that we voted for in Congress. It is a program that goes on for 4, 6, and 8 years, and the kids end up not learning to speak either English or Spanish. Yesterday I was in a radio program in San Antonio, and one of the people who called in said that he was an American citizen, Hispanic, married to an illegal person, and they took the kid to school in San Antonio, and they wanted to put him in a bilingual program, and he refused. Said, we're not going to allow that to happen because he will not learn to speak English. They insisted he not be put in. He was kept out, and now he's doing extraordinarily well and getting A's in all his courses. And this is what we have to understand, that the bilingual program, as it applies in the schools now, does more harm than good. And parents should not accept a program that does not ensure that the young people do not learn to speak English. That's one of the things we should be alert to. Ed Koch talked about the other one, social promotion, which still exists today in many parts of New York City. Social promotion means that if you do your work, you pass. If you don't do your work, you pass. You pass because you're a year older. And many parents don't understand that if there is social promotion, they get a report card saying the kid passed. It doesn't mean anything because he didn't learn anything. That's why the parents have to go to parent-teachers conferences. That's why they have to go in and verify that they are getting homework, that they are learning, because the system does not allow that to happen in too many cases. And what happens is the young people are passed from one grade to another. When they get to the 9th and 10th grade, they are perhaps at the 4th or 5th grade level, and then they drop out. That's where the dropout from high school takes place, in the 9th and 10th grades. And that's why we need to have social promotion eliminated in all grades. As Ed pointed out, when I was deputy mayor and he was mayor, we brought in Frank Macchiarola and we set up what I called educational gates, where we said the child is not learning in a particular grade, he should be left behind, but not to be put with the same younger students, but to be put in special classes and then get special courses. When he's back to grade level, then he goes back to his regular grade. That system worked very well until Macchiarola left and I left and Ed Koch left, and they went back to social promotion. And all of these years, we've been trying to eliminate it. So far, we've been successful in doing it. The 3rd, 5th, and 7th grade, which is something, but certainly it is not enough. That's been the problem with many of the other things that I don't have time to talk about. Tracking, for example, where kids are put in different courses. Other programs that are misapplied, like special education. Vocational courses, where kids are sent to schools, where they are taking courses that are dead end. I was sent to a school for airplane mechanics. And for airplane mechanics, when the airplanes were internal combustion engines, which nobody used. And I learned how to take them apart. I learned mechanical drawing, and I learned drafting. But it was only because a student in my school, I joined the school newspaper, told me if I didn't change to the academic course, I would not be able to go to college. So my mentor was a fellow student in high school. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. Now those internal combustion engines, by the way, are still at the high school for marine and aviation trades today in the New York City school system. And therefore, it takes a long time to bring about change. And of course, the best example that you know is the social promotion at the colleges. And you all know the story, which I don't have to repeat, about what I found when I became a trustee and then chairman of the board of the City University. We found students, as Andrew Wolf has written today, at Astor's Community College, which was a bilingual college which I started in 1968. I started it when I was president of the Bronx because there were high school kids and college kids coming in from the Dominican Republic who could not speak English. So I thought in a bilingual college they would be able to continue their college education and graduate. But we found in 1997, 98, 99 that they were not learning to speak English because only 13% of the graduating students passed the written assessment test. We found that the Department of Education at City College, students were getting a degree in education who could not pass the teacher's exam in English. The Daily News had an article about a Puerto Rican young man who graduated from City College in Education in 1994 and who had failed the teacher's exam 12 times and was teaching as a provisional teacher. And they asked him, how come you can't pass the test? And he said, it's a very difficult test. It's a guy, the name of Robert Frost, the guy with the poems, which he couldn't figure out. So that's what was going on. At the CUNY Law School, they were giving degrees in law to students who could not pass the bar exam. And generally, there were no standards. I eliminated open admissions, which had been begun in 1969, and which I opposed in 1969, and it was eliminated for the senior colleges in 1999. Only took me 30 years to do it. So that gives you an idea of how difficult it is to bring about change. So I want to urge again the importance of education. There's one more problem which has to be discussed, and that is the issue of immigration. We have to face up to the reality that our community has always been living in the United States. Ponce de Leon came to Florida in 1508 looking for the fountain of youth, and many Spaniards explored large parts of this country. But the real migration began shortly after the Second World War. And it began because the Latin American people got fed up with the fact that the 500-year siesta was continuing. They could not see any economic development in their own countries. So they decided to come to the United States, and they have been coming in large numbers, many of them illegally and without any documents. And that's why we now have 12 to perhaps 20 million illegal aliens here. We need a comprehensive immigration plan that enables those individuals to come out of the shadows and to learn to speak English, to pay a fine for their illegality, and to become American citizens over a period of time. But in the meantime, we have to address the problem of the continuing immigration from the Latin American countries. And that arises because the leaders of those countries do not take any action to improve their economies. And we have to use pressure on them, which we can do because we have influence over them, to make sure that they perform. In 2003, Vicente Fox, the then president of Mexico, went on television and said, there are 100 million Mexicans. 50 million are living below the level of poverty, and it isn't likely in the term of office that I have remaining that I will be able to improve the conditions. That was a very elegant way of saying, get out of here and go to the United States, which the Mexican people did. And they're coming and continue to come in large numbers, and they will continue to come in large numbers unless we take action. It is possible for countries to improve their economies. Singapore, Taiwan, Formosa, countries of Southeast Asia have done it. 40 years ago, they were as badly off as Latin America, but they have been able to improve their economies. And the leaders of Latin America must do so as well. The point is that we got to ensure that the 25% of our population who are here become assimilated. And the formula for that was written by Peter Salins in his book, Peter is Here, Assimilation American Style, when he said, we've got to have three things. The first is we got to learn to speak English. Secondly, we got to accept and subscribe to the American idea that we live in a democracy. And I can tell you this is so because I went to Congress and nobody ever tried to tell me what to do. We do live in a democracy. We have constitutional values. We have a Bill of Rights. We have a judiciary that is independent. We have separation of powers. This is an important thing that needs to be accepted. That's point two. Point three, we already have, and that is work hard. We know how to work hard in miserable jobs, but we have to work hard in important jobs. And we have to ensure that we become assimilated and follow the same standards as everybody else, which we can do. We're capable of doing any of those things, but we have not been moving as fast as possible. And that is why, because we need to move ahead to have the same standards as everybody else, I say we have got to become one nation with one standard, the same standard for all. Thank you.